Alrighty guys, in this segment, we're going to teach you how to install the rear spats and winglets onto the i30 Sedan end. So to get started, you're going to need a few tools. What you're going to need is an 8mm drill bit, ideally a white, you can use a black one, but a white pencil or pen, something like that. 10mm spanner with a ratchet end is going to make your life easier. A flathead screwdriver or a trim removal tool, and a 4mm Allen key or Allen key bit. All right guys, step one, we're going to take our flathead screwdriver or trim removal tool and take out these 3 clips right there. FYI, it's not that one, not this one. It's these 3 here. So next, you're going to pull the guard liner out, which is here, to give you some clearance to get in behind it and fasten up those bolts and nuts. Next, take your rear spat, place it underneath the rear bumper like so. You want to align this edge, and we'll get a close shot for you here, this edge with this edge of that mud flap guard liner there. You're also going to want to pay attention to this edge here. That top of the beveled edge should sit in line with the rear bumper there. And finally, the third point of registration is this edge here. That sharp, flat edge of your spat should sit in line with this edge here, like so. Once you have that all nicely lined up, holding it tightly in place, take your pencil or pen, mark your holes, and make sure you don't move it too much. You can also clamp this in place. However, it's a little bit difficult to clamp it on the driver's side. Passenger side has a lot more room, but for argument's sake, I'm just doing it this way. Next, take your 8mm drill bit and punch in some pilot holes. Now that we've got the holes drilled, we can take our nut and bolt and washer combos and put them in place. You've got four holes that you need to fill. If you're using the optional winglets, they are going to, sorry, I should put it the other way around. They're going to also utilize the same nut and bolts. Thanks, Lamborghini. So firstly, I like to install this one first because it's not going to go through the winglet as well. Take your nut, bolt and washer combo. There are cars moving all around the place. Take your first nut and bolt, first bolt and washer. Spit it out, man. Go in through here. Then take your winglet, line it up with the holes and insert the rest of the bolts and nuts. Ideally starting with the middle one here, because that's going to hold it all in place for you, like so. Now, before you go and tighten up the remaining 3 bolts that hold the winglet and spat in place, this is your opportunity to adjust how far out or in or what angle you would like your spat to sit on. Another thing to note, if you take a look under here, this particular adjustment point kind of covers over the clip location that you need to put in there. So, one way or another, you're going to need to have this side slightly out to allow enough room for you to get your clip in there when you're finished. Then take your 10mm ratchet spanner, 4mm Allen key, and tighten them up. All right, so once those are all tightened up, you can flex this guard liner back in, take the 3 clips that you took out, and pop them back in place. And you're done. All right guys, you got through the rear spats. Now we're up to the flow lock rear diffuser. The things you're going to need to install the flow lock diffuser are your drill and a 6mm drill bit, an 11mm drill bit, an 8mm ratcheting spanner. Well, it doesn't have to be ratcheting, again, but it's ideal. A 4mm Allen key and a 3mm Allen key. A flat screwdriver or a trim removal tool, and a 10mm socket with a long extension. First thing we're going to do, take your flat screwdriver or trim removal tool and pop out these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips along the front of the under tray. Once you've taken out the 5 clips along the front, you have 1/6 one hidden just up here. Next, grab your 10mm socket and a long extension, and you're going to remove the 2 bolts holding the under tray up here. One there and one there.
The single is one in the middle.
Finally, you're going to reach up in the center of the rear diffuser section here and untwist this plastic fastener. Take note, this fastener remains attached to the under tray. Next up, grab your 11mm drill bit and we're going to widen the holes where those clips went in earlier. Next, we're going to take the jack nuts and our jack nut tool and insert them into those holes that we just widened. Next up, take your rear valance, flow lock diffuser without the flow lock fins, take your bolt and a 4mm Allen key head and attach it to the rear bumper. All right, once you've got your rear valance in place, don't tighten the bolts fully. Make sure you pay attention to these holes here. There's 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They should line up with the base of these fins. All right, so you want to make sure that that stays in line. Once you've got them in line, then you can tighten up those back bolts to make sure you're going to drill your pilot holes for the remaining fasteners in the correct spot. Once you've tightened up those rear bolts, take your 6mm drill bit this time and punch in some pilot holes. Now that we've drilled our pilot holes, take your bolt and washer combo. So you're going to take these ones with the black head, long silver bolt, slide them into this washer, which is a really nice looking fitting. That's going to go underneath, like so. Take your large washer, that's going to go in behind, and then put your nut on the top of that.
Press my hand up against this metal thing.
Now that we've got the valance solidly installed on there, we can insert the flow lock fins, starting with L4, L3, L2, and L1, and then obviously going the opposite direction. You're going to have R1, R2, R3, and R4. So lastly, to reinstall the rear under tray, you're going to need to remove these bolts here using your 4mm Allen key. Then reinsert the diffuser, making sure you slot this part of the diffuser in between the flow lock diffuser and the rear of the bumper. This is a little easier to do if you take your flathead screwdriver and wedge open the gap between the diffuser and the flow lock diffuser. Now with that in place, tighten up the hand fastener in the center. There we are. Reinstall the diffuser bolts and put in the 2 nuts. And lastly, 1 clip up on the side of the under tray. The remaining ones will remain out because you've replaced them with bolts and nuts. Next up, we're going to install the front splitter, extensions, and winglets. The things you're going to need are 8mm drill bit and a drill, 4mm Allen key bit or Allen key, 10mm ratcheting spanner, flathead screwdriver or a trim removal tool, a 10mm socket with a drill attachment or similar, and some clamps. First up, we're going to remove the factory weather strip by removing the 2 clips in either corner with a flat screwdriver or a trim removal tool, like so, and then pull it away from the car. Yeah. Next step, we're going to remove the under tray by removing the little push clips all the way around the outside and then a couple of bolts underneath there. Next, we're going to take some clamps and our front splitter and clamp it into place. Now when you're clamping this in place, make sure your splitter follows the inner edge of the underside of the bumper along here. All right, next up, I encourage you all to take all the nuts and bolts and washers that come in your kit and lay them out as you see here so that you can ensure you're putting the right ones in the correct spots. So use the paperwork that they give you. I'm not going to run through it all because there's a lot of nuts and bolts here. It's not that complicated to figure out which ones go where. But once you've got them laid out, we've pre-drilled our holes, we're going to install the first 4 on either side, so that's 8 in total, leaving the 4 in the middle when we're going to install the brackets. Now that we've got the 8 outer bolts in, take your ratchet spanner and your 4mm Allen bit and tighten them up. Alrighty, next up we're going to take the brackets to fasten around the crash bar. So, there are 2-piece setup as you can see. This one goes in first underneath the bar and is going to lock around the front of it essentially. This one is going to go over the top of the bar. So you can see the crash bar will essentially be through here. We're going to put some bolts on there to tighten that in place, and then we can attach the remaining bolts to these brackets from underneath. Don't forget your washers, guys.
Two hours later.
Alright, now the splitter is fastened, we're going to reinstall the under tray and then we're going to put our extensions and winglets on. Alrighty, next we're going to install the extensions and winglets. Now obviously these are optional, you don't have to put them on, so if you haven't chosen to get them, you can skip to the next part now. If you have purchased them and you're using both, you're going to need to use the 2 longer bolts that come in your kit for the 2 rear ones and then the 3 shorter ones. If you're only installing the extension or just the winglet, then you'll only use the shorter bolts. Now, once you've loosely installed all of the bolts, you can adjust how far in or out you want your extensions and winglet to sit, together or independently. Once you've decided, you can tighten them up and it'll stay where you've left it. That's how you install the front splitter, extensions and winglet. Last part of the install, guys, is the side splitters and the winglets. To install these, you're going to need your 8mm drill bit, an 11mm drill bit, a Phillips head drill bit or screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, your 4mm Torx bit or 4mm Allen key, and a jacknut installation tool, or you can utilize the one that's provided. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remove 2 of the factory bolts from underneath the car. First one is this large one here, there, towards the front of the vehicle. The second one is here, the back of the vehicle. Pay no attention to the remaining center bolts. These are going to line up with the holes that you see on the kit here, these large ones. Next, you're going to take these larger 1 1/4 inch bolts that are going to replace these ones just for the time being, don't get rid of it, and your washer, and you're going to bolt the skirt into place utilizing those 2 locations. Now don't go over tightening this just yet, because you want to be able to slide it back and forth in and out to align it correctly. You want that edge to sit nicely. I'm going to tighten up this front one. You want that to sit in nicely like so. It's also important to check underneath. There are a few holes in the splitter that allow access to screws and bolts behind the splitter. Make sure that those line up. Next, take your 8mm drill bit and we're going to pre-drill some holes. Once we've pre-drilled all our holes, we can remove those 2 bolts and drill out those holes further to 11mm to allow our jack nuts. Now make sure when you're drilling out your holes to 11mm, you don't drill out the front one. Leave that at 8mm because that's going to have a nut and bolt combination instead of a jack nut. Take your jack nut tool and start installing your jack nuts. Now that all the jack nuts are in, we're going to take those longer 1 1/4 inch bolts for either end. Whoops. Now that all the jack nuts are in, we're going to reinstall the 1 1/4 inch bolts to hold the splitter in place. Then we're going to take our bolt and washers and install them into the jack nuts.
This is the main material.
Using the little access hole here, you want to remove the small Phillips head screw and replace it with this longer one. Next, you want to remove the front bolt to give a little bit of extra flex in the splitter, like this. Then you're going to remove 5 of these small screws to give you access to this little front panel here. 1, 2, 3, and if you've aligned your splitter correctly, 4 and 5 should be here. Take your flat screwdriver or pry tool and gently pry this panel down. Pry something in there to hold that open. You're going to take a nut and bolt and washer combo. Now reinstall small screws to hold that little panel in place, and we could go along and tighten up all of the remaining bolts. And lastly, if you optioned the winglets for your car, take the supplied bolt and washer and gently insert them into the gold threaded inserts. Keeping in mind these do not need to be over tightened to hold it in place firmly. Also, you can adjust how far in or out they sit.